EA did a good job with the Star Wars license. Now, before you close out of the video or grab your pitchforks, hear me out. At a time when many can agree Star Wars is, well, not at its best, EA continually produced stellar Star Wars games and stories that rival or even overshadow what Disney has brought to the table. And I'm here to prove it, through not only sales figures and public reception, but through the stories these games tell as well. For 10 years, EA held the exclusive rights to make Star Wars games, and in that time, they made 5 AAA titles. Yes, they also made some mobile games, but you couldn't pay me to play those, so we won't even be discussing them today. Instead, we'll be focusing our attention on their main stage titles. In my opinion, each of these games is great, but don't just take my word for it. Each of these releases saw great commercial success and were reviewed highly, with many even receiving awards for their achievements. Hell, Jedi Survivor even won a Grammy. To top it off, the 3 best-selling Star Wars games of all time were made by EA. And if that's not impressive enough, Jedi Survivor also secured a spot in the top 10, landing at number 8. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, wasn't Star Wars Squadrons one of their games? Didn't that flop really hard? Well, yeah, it didn't perform great. But I actually have a whole video explaining why I still think Squadrons is one of the best Star Wars experiences out there, so I won't dive into that here, and you can check that out on your own time. Instead, I want to focus our attention on these 4 titles, Battlefront 1 and 2, and Jedi Fallen Order, and Survival. When comparing these games to the films and shows released by Disney recently, they're not just better in overall quality, but the narratives they contain as well. And given the recent state of Star Wars games, I think it's become quite apparent just how good of a job EA did with handling the license, especially when looking at what happens when other corporations in the same space, looking at you Ubisoft, have done with the same license, with Outlaws performing terribly in sales and being described as lackluster at best. And trust me, I know, EA has a horrible track record. They're known for being lazy and sloppy with IPs, and they've shown an incomprehensible ability to connect with consumers without coming across as an entitled, greed-filled 1984-style megacorp. But despite this, they somehow managed to produce some of the best Star Wars games to date, with stories that are clearly written by fans for fans, which, surprisingly to say, is rare in today's climate. And I know any praise thrown towards EA's way is almost sure to be shot down instantly, and the criticism they receive is well deserved. They've underpaid developers, are notorious for their overuse of microtransactions, and represent a lot of what has ruined the current AAA landscape. But that being said, I really do think they did a good job with Star Wars. Again, just hear me out. Take Battlefront 2 for example, a game that is still going strong 6 years after it debuted, and 5 years since it was last updated. Besides its stellar multiplayer, which I could talk at length about, it's among my most played games of all time. Seriously, I don't know how they managed to revive this game post-launch and ended up making it into such an immersive and addicting experience. Yes, it had one of the worst launches in history, and its team still holds the record for the most downvoted Reddit post of all time. However, for the past 5 years, it has been the best Star Wars multiplayer experience out there, and it's not hard to see why many people still play it. Besides that amazing multiplayer experience, the campaign was pretty solid. Again, hear me out.
Stay with me here.
I am aware that a lot of what I'm saying could be considered highly controversial, and I do see why. I know that a ton of players had issues with this campaign. The whole Imperial soldier gone good trope upset many, and I hear you. Hopefully one day we'll all get to live out our Imperial supremacy dreams, and the bad character gone good is a tired concept, especially in the Star Wars canon. But besides that, the story the game tells is quite good. There's no major plot holes, it has a unique, cohesive story that doesn't go out of its way to break canon, it adds fresh ideas to the Star Wars universe in a creative way, such as this scene where Iden jettisons herself out of a rebellion cruiser and lands in the hangar of an Imperial Corvette that just hopped out of hyperspace. You can't tell me that wasn't badass. Furthermore, the campaign doesn't bring up questions that are never answered, like we see far too much of now. And it's also filled with beloved characters that are treated with the respect they deserve. Honestly, you can't tell me that this isn't the best depiction of Luke we've seen since Disney acquired Star Wars, barring the Mando 2 season finale. In this scene with Del, he's a true Jedi, giving sound advice and caring for those who should be his enemies, even going so far as to aid them in their journey. I also have to add, and it's crazy that this is true, but this scene delivers one of my favorite lines in Star Wars, which I can't believe I'm saying that since it's coming from EA. But it's true, just watch for yourself.
Of course there's conflict in me. I'm not blind. I know what the Empire is capable of, but what else is there?
A choice.
The rebellion?
No. A choice to be better.
A choice to be better. Damn, that delivery goes hard. I mean, compare this Luke with the nephew-killing homeless vet that discards of those with attachments, husk of a man we see in Disney, and it becomes quite clear how well EA handled Luke and the other characters utilized. Also, I didn't know this deserved credit until Outlaws and Ubisoft reared their greed-filled heads, but Battlefront 2 came with free story DLC and didn't charge players to see the characters they enjoyed, like Outlaws has done with their upcoming $40 DLC. All in all, Battlefront 2 will forever remain one of my favorite games of all time, and I know I've been getting a lot of praise, but I do have to mention, the 2015 Battlefront is also great in its own right. While it did lack the depth of content we see in Battlefront 2, and was criticized deservingly for this, visually, it's still stunning, and the trench run is so much fun. While there's a ton of controversy that surrounded both of these games, I still firmly believe that looking back now, it's evident. EA and DICE did a good job with the Battlefront series, with my main complaint against them being we didn't get to see enough. It's not just the Battlefront series that EA handled well. The Jedi series has become one of the most anticipated and loved Star Wars franchises out there. I can't even describe how hyped I was to play the most recent installation, Survivor, and boy, when I got my hands on it, it didn't disappoint. Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor each have very well written stories that turn the main character Cal Kestis into a fan favorite, not to mention the real hero of the games, BD1, except for when he won't fucking stem. These games are an absolute blast to play, and the mods available for them turn them into any Star Wars fan's dream Jedi experience. The games also delivered not only one of the best Order 66 depictions post Disney, I mean, if you watch this scene with no emotion, get help. But also provide a very creative and unique story throughout that I and many others are eager to see finished in the last game. When you compare the Jedi series stories to Disney's sequels, you start to see a stark contrast in the way the characters are treated. Cal Kestis, for example, goes through a real emotional journey. We as the players are given the time and the perspective needed to feel the impact of what he has lost and why he continues to fight. Spoiler alert for the Jedi Survivor game, so skip to here if you're worried about that. But when Bode betrays Cal, I remember being pissed, upset, and angered. And these emotions fueled me through the rest of the game. Contrast all that build-up in emotion with something like Rey's journey in The Rise of Skywalker, where her arc comes to a rush and incomplete end, her losses don't mean anything, and the whole narrative relies much more on nostalgia than original storytelling. All of this goes to show how EA managed to give us a story that felt personal and at the same time epic in scope. Now, as I've said throughout this video, EA definitely has their fair share of missteps and sins, but with Star Wars, I think they did a great job. The largest complaint against this that I've heard is that EA did not produce enough games during their Star Wars tenure, which is fair, they were slow to start, but even then, I think these 4 solid titles and one underrated beauty, love you Squadrons, are really high in quality, given that they were all made in the span of 10 years, averaging one game every 2 years, which I think is completely acceptable. Yes, the Star Wars license is potentially in a better place now that it's able to be used by anyone, but only time will tell whether these new games will live up to expectations, seeing that one has already failed to do so. In the meantime, I'm just trying to say, EA deserves more credit for what they did for Star Wars during a time when many were losing hope in the franchise. Let me know what y'all think. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. A ton of work goes into making these videos each week, and subscribing is the best way to support the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. Consider leaving a like or even subscribing, and I'll see you next week.